Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and good to see you all here today. So someone gave a little cheer partway through that meditation. That may have been helpful. Um, and Mary indicated that she had knee replacement yesterday and couldn't feel up to it to joining us today, but we wish her a successful recovery from that procedure. So we've been talking about the Lotus Sutra, and we'll continue on with that today. But I'd like to backtrack a little bit in the interest of giving some context to the chapter that we'll be talking about primarily. And as some of you recall, we talked about this chapter describing the springing up from the earth of bodhisattvas, or the welling up of bodhisattvas from the earth. And in that chapter, remember the Buddha is sitting in this stupa, and he is talking about the Lotus Sutra, and there are all these beings congregated around him, just countless beings, and some of them are from other worlds. In the traditional Hindu and hence Buddhist cosmology, there were other worlds besides the world that we inhabit here on Earth. In fact, there are countless other worlds, and some of them are easier places to live. They're pure worlds. Our world is considered impure in the sense that it's kind of tough here. And hence it's called the Saha world, meaning endurance or forbearance, the world in which one must endure or forbear. So the bodhisattvas from these other worlds, more pure than ours, were offering the Buddha help in preaching the Lotus Sutra. In other words, they were going to help us out here on Earth with this task of preaching the Lotus Sutra. And the Buddha responds, he says, enough, my good sons. There is no need for you to protect and embrace this sutra. Why? Because in my world itself, right here, there are as many bodhisattva great ones as there are sands in 60,000 Ganges. So just countless bodhisattvas right here on Earth. And when the Buddha had said this, the earth of this 3,000 great thousandfold world trembled and split open, and from it innumerable tens of millions of billions of bodhisattva great ones sprang up together. So when we talked about this before, I kind of passed over that 3,000 great thousandfold world. And on quick reading, you might think, well, that refers to just all these other worlds out there. But actually, it's referring to this world. And in the Sanskrit version of this sutra, they just talk about the bodhisattvas emerging from the earth. They don't mention 3,000 great thousandfold. So what is that 3,000 great thousandfold world that the Buddha is referring to? Well, I don't know for sure, but one way of thinking about it is that there are many, many aspects to this world we create in our minds. there are many ways of viewing the world, many ways, countless ways of living in the world, of perceiving our situation. There are 3,000 great thousandfold ways, as is said here. So the world, as we live it, may be perceived as a dangerous place with threats everywhere. It may be perceived as a playground, a place to enjoy yourself. It may be perceived as a battle to be won, or a game to outmaneuver your competitors. It may be perceived as an opportunity to offer service. It may be perceived as a curious place to investigate. It may be perceived as an opportunity for spiritual development. There are many ways to perceive this world as we live it. So, one way of thinking about what the Buddha is trying to do for us is to offer a way of seeing the world, living in the world, that allows us to transcend the many difficulties of birth and old age and sickness and death, of not getting what you want, of getting what you don't want, of association with the unbeloved and separation from the beloved. So a way of living so that these necessary difficulties which arise in every life are sustainable. They don't overwhelm. They can be transcended in a way. So the Buddha is saying there's plenty of personnel here on earth to accomplish this. And then another chapter we talked about more recently was the chapter, The Lifespan or the Lifetime of the Buddha. What is a lifespan? What is a lifetime? Conventional way of looking at it, of course, is that the Buddha lived for 80 years and then died, and his body decomposed. But the Buddha in this chapter, The Lifetime of the Tathagata, says, in order to liberate the living as a skillful means, I appear to enter nirvana. Yet truly, I am not extinct. I am always here teaching the Dharma. I am always here teaching the Dharma. And when the living have become faithful, honest, and upright, and gentle, and wholeheartedly want to see the Buddha, even at the cost of their own lives, then, together with the assembly of monks, I appear on Holy Eagle Peak. Then I tell all the living that I am always here, not extinct. Yet, by the power of skillful means, I reveal both extinction and non-extinction. I reveal both extinction and non-extinction as alternative ways of looking at the lifespan. And when the living witness the end of an eon, When everything is consumed in a great fire, this land of mine remains safe and tranquil, always filled with human and heavenly beings. Its gardens and groves, halls and pavilions are adorned with all kinds of gems. Jeweled trees are full of flowers and fruit, and living beings freely enjoy themselves. So the next 3 chapters after the lifespan of the Buddha talk about the various and sundry and innumerable blessings that accrue from um, reading and reciting and preaching and copying the Lotus Sutra, the Dharma Flower Sutra that we've been studying. And these 3 chapters list all these blessings in a somewhat repetitive detail. And Donald Lopez and Jacqueline Stone wrote a commentary about the Lotus Sutra, and in that gave the opinion that these chapters may be somewhat tedious for the Western reader. And I think I would agree with that. But leave it to say that there are many benefits from reading and reciting and absorbing the Lotus Sutra. He's talking here to Maitreya, and he says, if any good sons or good daughters hear me teach about the long duration of my life, the chapter we just referred to, and believe and understand it deeply, they will see the Buddha always on Holy Eagle Peak, surrounded by a multitude of great bodhisattvas and shravakas preaching the Dharma. And they will see this world with its land of lapis lazuli, smooth and level, its 8 roads marked off with jambanada, gold and lined with jeweled trees, its tall buildings, all made of precious materials in which multitudes of bodhisattvas live together. If anyone is able to see such things, you should know that this is a sign of their profound faith and understanding. Indicating, I think, once again, that we have the opportunity to see in the world many different aspects, many different ways of looking at the world we live in. And there is the opportunity to see it in such a way that the Buddha just described, figuratively. So there are these 3 chapters where they describe the various blessings. And then there's a curious chapter right near the end of what is thought to be sort of the original Lotus Sutra. There are some chapters appended at the end, and we'll talk about that later. But right near the end of the sort of first draft of the Lotus Sutra, a chapter called Never Disrespectful Bodhisattva. And it starts, at that time, the Buddha spoke to the Bodhisattva Great Strength, the Great One. He's talking to someone called Bodhisattva Great Strength. You should know now that when monks, nuns, laymen, or lay women embrace the Dharma Flower Sutra, if anyone curses, abuses, or slanders them, that person will receive great punishment, as taught earlier. I think that refers to a teaching in which such individuals will spend time in Avicii hell in future lifetimes. It's a temporary hell. It's not, doesn't go on eternally, and there is a way out. And as is often stated in the Lotus Sutra, everyone finds their way to Buddhahood, including those in Avicii hell. But those who attain blessings as taught before will have their eyes, ears, nose, tongues, bodies, and thoughts purified. And then the Buddha goes on to talk about something that occurred long ago. After the extinction of the first majestic voice king Tathagata, this is one of the Buddhas that lived countless eons ago, and after the end of the true Dharma, in other words, when this Buddha's teachings had become dimmed with time and no one seemed to remember them anymore. During the period of the merely formal Dharma, extremely arrogant monks had great power. At this time, there was a bodhisattva monk named Never Disrespectful. Sometimes it's translated never disparaging. Great strength. Why do you think he was named Never Disrespectful? That monk bowed in obeisance before everyone he met, whether monk, nun, layman, or laywoman, and praised them, saying, I deeply respect you. I would never dare to be disrespectful or arrogant toward you. Why? Because all of you are practicing the bodhisattva way and surely will become Buddhas. This monk did not devote himself to reading or reciting sutras, but simply went around bowing to people. If he saw the four groups off in the distance, the four groups being monks, nuns, lay women, and lay men, he would make a point of going up to them, bowing in obeisance, and praising them, saying, I would never dare to disrespect you because surely you are all to become Buddhas. Now, among the four groups, there were those who became angry, enraged, and mean-spirited, and reviled and cursed him, saying, this ignorant monk who takes it on himself to announce that he does not disrespect us and assures us of becoming Buddhas, where did he come from? We have no use for such empty, false assurances. Thus he passed many years constantly being cursed, but never becoming angry or enraged, and always saying, surely you are to become Buddhas. When he spoke this way, some would hit him with sticks, tiles, or stones. But even if he ran off and stood at a distance, he would continue to cry out loudly from a distance, I would not dare to disrespect you. Surely all of you are to become Buddhas. And because he always spoke in this way, the extremely arrogant monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen called him Never Disrespectful. When this monk was nearing death, from the sky he heard 200 million billion verses of the Dharma Flower Sutra, which majestic voice King Buddha had previously taught. And he was able to receive and embrace them all. Immediately, he obtained the purity of vision of the faculties of the ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, described earlier, having obtained the purity of these 6 faculties, his life was extended for 2 million billion myriads of years, and he taught this Dharma Flower Sutra everywhere for the people. So the story of never disrespectful or never disparaging bodhisattva. Notice that sometimes he would, I must say, when I first read this, it had almost a comical effect. I could imagine this person on a hillside far enough away that he couldn't get hit by the stones that were being thrown at him, calling out loudly, "I would not disrespect you. Surely all of you are to become Buddhas." So he was not a martyr. He didn't allow himself to be stoned and beat, but he was persistent, focused on a way of viewing the world in which everyone deserved respect and everyone was a potential Buddha. Everyone was on a path to Buddhahood, even if they might be currently deluded and seemingly hopeless. They were on their path to Buddhahood and would ultimately become Buddhas. So this story is, in part, a suggestion, I think, as to how we view others, even those who are abusive, which we may have to keep our distance from if they're throwing stones and tiles. But maintaining an attitude of respect for all beings. Maybe it's just the way I remember things. Maybe it's just the way I remember things, but I do think that in the past, there was more shame involved with being disrespectful. And that now there seems to be, at least among many, just an attitude that it's okay to be disparaging of others. This teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and by the way, it's interesting that when never disrespectful bodhisattva heard this voice from above, there were, 200 million billion verses of the Dharma Flower Sutra? We've been talking about this sutra for quite a while, but there definitely are not that many verses in the Lotus Sutra. We've been using Gene Reeves' translation here. So it suggests that the Lotus Sutra that we've been talking about all along is much greater than the words assembled here that we've been reading. And that's why we seem to be always talking about the Lotus Sutra without actually reading the Lotus Sutra. Because the Lotus Sutra is perhaps beyond words. But what we have been reading points toward it. And in this little curious chapter, it points toward a way of viewing others that involves universal respect. And in other chapters, it talks about a way of viewing everything that involves transcendence of the difficulties that life inevitably presents. So I think I'll stop there, and I'll with questions about, what is this Lotus Sutra all about? How do we view the Buddha? How do we view others? How do we view this earthly existence? And do we have our choice and can view it any way we like? Or are some ways of viewing things more valid than others? So we'll stop there and go into breakout rooms. Thank you very much for listening today. I appreciate you all.